Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates. Now, viewers, we are getting into a conversation this morning with the Tobago Martin West candidate for the PNM, and that is Mr. Hans DesVignes. Now, you would have known Mr. DesVignes as one of those prolific media personalities in Trinidad and Tobago, but he is stepping forth and actually stepping into the shoes of Dr. Keith Rowley, who held that constituency for quite a number of years. So good morning and welcome to you, Mr. DesVignes, and welcome to the Tobago Updates.
Good morning Tobago, and thank you so much for having me here on Tobago Updates. It's a blessing to be here in Tobago once again.
All right, great. And of course, you are no stranger to Tobago as well, because you are also, your heritage, some of your heritage is here.
I mean, very much so. My grandmother was Bernadette DesVignes. She was actually the first woman to serve in THA, and she served in different capacities as well as representing her community. My grandfather, Henry DesVignes, he actually had a bar in Maria called The Fountain. My father, Dr. Yvonne DesVignes, again, a great representation of what, you know, the Tobago value system and morals and situations can produce, and he also served in the THA.
Yes.
So, I mean, I am deeply rooted here in Tobago, and as always, it's a pleasure to be here in Tobago, connecting to my roots.
So tell me about this switch that you're making from just being a media personality now to stepping into politics. What made you want to make that switch?
All right. Well, the first thing we need to look at is love for country, patriotism, service, wanting to contribute to the future that is being created right now by the People's National Movement. And do you have any kids, Kandace?
No,
chance? Okay.
no.
But anyone that has children or a niece or a nephew or a little brother or a little sister, what you want is you want a better environment for them to grow up in. And what I see is the environment is being created by the People's National Movement, and I wanted to step forward and serve. You know, you do media, and media in itself and communications in itself is a lot of service. A service to your client, the people whose ads you all play, or the person who's hired you to host an event, or the person who's hired you to produce an event, or the person who is your client in whatever way you're serving. Media and communication is a lot about service. In this arena, people will say politics, you know, power, they use it with power. It's about leadership, and leadership is about service. And I wanted to serve my country. And that's how come I decided to step forward.
Now, you mentioned that there were some things that had started happening under the PNM government over the past 10 years that you believe that should continue, and that you could also be a part of that continuance. Tell me about those things.
All right. Well, let's look at all the youth programs that were put into place. Youth programs in terms of agriculture, training in terms of the pipe program, training in terms of the heavy equipment and machinery. There's so many programs. Then you look at Shamfa Kojolus and what she did with the Ministry of Sport and Community Development, and some of the programs that she had, for example, Empower, that we see transforming the lives of some of the young men in Tobago. These are young men that may not have done so well in secondary school, and now we have them in a program to shape their minds and show them how to continue in a prosperous way and create a better future for themselves and their families, and by extent, the country. When you look at business development, you see a lot of it. Now let's talk about Tobago a little more directly. Look at the A&R Robinson International Airport. We are seeing the airport. Yes, there are a few things that need to happen before we open the airport to actually have the tourists in. What does that mean? The airport means more tourists for Tobago, more tourism for Tobago. Right, so the tourists come in, more tourists. Where do we keep them? We look at the negotiations that have been made in terms of, or are being made in terms of Sandals and Marriott. What does that mean for Tobago farmers? That means we can have greater agriculture in Tobago, and farm to table is a thing that is of interest to any consumer in our modern world. So when you talk agriculture, my father has always boasted, yes, my father is a doctor, but he always has been proud of, as Dr. Rowley has as well, always has boasted and been proud of the agriculture sector in Tobago and what we could possibly produce. And with a Sandals or a Marriott, those things grow exponentially and they grow quickly. And some may say, All right, well, what happens to the small guest houses? Well, Sandals, Marriott, a lot of those, the consumers or guests of those hotels go to the front of the plane, fill up the first class. What happens to the rest of the plane? The rest of the plane will stay in a lot of the other guest houses, the smaller accommodations accommodation that we have all around Tobago. The growth that we are seeing is progressive, and it's happening in front of our faces. We're seeing it, but sometimes we don't stop to appreciate what's happening in front of us.
Now, you are somebody, of course, and the passion is coming out in terms of young people and creating a better future for young people. How do you think that you can be influential in creating a better space for young people? Because when you look at society today, one of the major problems that keeps popping up is that of unemployment, and not just unemployment, but meaningful employment.
Right.
So to keep people away from criminal elements and all of these other social ills. So how do you think your representation will make a difference in making a young person's life better?
Well, there are a few things. One, we lead by example. So I plan to lead by example. Just by doing what I'm doing now, that sends a message and an example. Secondly, when we talk about the same things that I was speaking about in terms of the agriculture sector growing, the tourism sector growing, what does that mean for jobs? More job opportunities for young people across the board, skilled and unskilled labor. And when we say skilled and unskilled labor, we're not just talking when the hotel or the airport opens. It's continuous, because again, we need people to work and we need people to build. So we're talking from construction stage to post completion stage. There are those opportunities. For me, I also have seen the development and the opportunities that have been created by our two representatives here in Tobago, Ayana Webster Roy and Shamfa Kojo Lewis. Through their ministries, they've created a lot of opportunities. Me personally, it is just to continue what the PNM is doing in whatever sector, in whichever situation I'm placed in. For Diego Martin West, I do have plans of how to do that. And I've already started that in terms of the five-a-side football tournament that I did, and liaising with some of these young people within the different communities within the constituency. On a greater level, we just continue doing what we're doing and encourage young people in positive aspects.
Now, what about the relationship between the central government and the THE? As we know, over the past few years, it's been a bit strained.
Right.
How do you view that relationship working? How do you view being able to work with the THE? If you want to work with the THE, tell me a little bit about that, Pat.
Obviously. And when you look at the PNM's manifesto, it is in the PNM's manifesto that the relationship, we want it to continue to grow and continue to be better and continued improvement. We do want autonomy for Tobago. It is in the manifesto. It is something that the People's National Movement has pushed for. And, you know, other people that want to comment and say they are for Tobago, they are not the ones pushing this agenda of, yeah, we want autonomy for Tobago and getting it in a sustainable, pragmatic way. People just talk. A lot of people just talk, but the truth is, it's there in the manifesto and it's proven through the actions. It's something that Dr. Rowley has advocated for many times, and it's something that even our current Prime Minister, Stuart Nyasi, we see advocating for.
So you see yourself as being one of those persons that would reach out from time to time to work with the THE?
I mean, let me be quite honest with you. Even in my private life, before this life, I am someone that would put myself and make myself available for the Tobago House Assembly if they call me to one host, if they call for my opinion, contribution, even recommendations. There was a symposium the other day where someone from the THE actually called me and asked me for a recommendation on some who I think should be part of that symposium in terms of technology. And I was able to recommend names, connect them with the people, because that's the only things that I love to do. I love to connect people. So I was able to connect them. So in my personal life, I would do it. And every part of my life, Tobago is where my navel string is buried, you know. It's my heart and my soul.
All right, great. Now we're going to have to stick a pin right there because we got to go for a break. But don't worry, the conversation continues with Mr. Hans DesVignes when we come back. Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates. Viewers, we are continuing our conversation this morning with Mr. Hans DesVignes, who is the PNM's candidate for the Dago Martin West constituency. Now, Mr. DesVignes, before we went into the break, we were talking a little bit about the relationship between the central government and the THA and your views on it. Now, what about in terms of making sure certain policies, certain initiatives are done in a way that reflects Tobago or has Tobago in mind? Yeah. And I say this to say that sometimes things in Tobago are a little bit different from Trinidad, whether it's be culture, geographically, all of those things. And there's a complaint on the ground that sometimes these initiatives there's no provision, or there's no, the uniqueness of Tobago is not taken into consideration. How do you think that you can be that person, to be that voice of reason, to say, make certain exceptions or adjust certain things so that Tobago really does benefit?
Well, once again, when you look at what the PNM has done in Tobago, the THA actually owns most of the land heritage sites, example, Pigeon Point. And those things are because of People's National Movement and what has been done and has been agreed to. And again, we remain committed to the autonomy for Tobago and working with Tobago. It's Trinidad and Tobago. And when you think about it, the People's National Movement, that's what we do. We are about country. And it is about the citizens playing a part as well. And again, letting their voices be heard when we have consultations. When you look at Tobago and you look at Tobago's uniqueness, as you mentioned, in almost every community in Tobago, there are community centers. There are areas that the citizens of Tobago could just benefit from in a real substantial way.
Mm-hmm. And tell me also about, in terms of getting things done for the THA. Right. And I say this to say because if you've been sticking your ear a little bit on what's been happening on the TPP platform, there's a complaint that, whether it is to get letters of non-objection signed for the THA to benefit from grants and so on, that's not happening through the central government. Yeah. Now, whether or not that claim is true, of course, we know in the political season, no. But then how could you advocate so that things like that to benefit Tobago does happen regardless of the politics?
So again, in a political season, people go up on platforms and they just say things, and they don't expand on the reason for some of these things. A lot of things that we see, they are deeper reason. There's a deeper reasoning behind these things that I wouldn't get into in this interview. All right. But again, once things are, one, transparent, two, aligned with what the principle, law, and rule is, then by all means, those things will always get support from the People's National Movement.
Now, earlier you also mentioned your desires to help the agriculture sector grow. And we know that there's the Ministry of Agriculture in Trinidad that, Trinidad and Tobago, but at the central government level, right, that has quite a lot of initiatives and incentives for the agriculture industry. And when you talk to farmers and so on the ground, they complain that they're not always able to access some of those things.
Right.
How are you going to bridge that gap?
Well, again, this is where we have to continue to work with people and get the information to them. A lot of the times, there are things in terms of paperwork that people don't necessarily understand. And that is one of the reasons why Prime Minister Stuart Young is putting in place a Ministry of Implementation and Efficiency, because we want to look at these things, these processes where the people that really need to be impacted by these things sometimes cannot get through the process, because whether it be because of an employee or because of their own lack of complete understanding. So again, we will continue to work with people to make these things possible and make these things happen and be better, because that's what we want. We do want a better Trinidad and Tobago. And then again, it is continuous improvement.
And does that mean that there would also be an ease of doing business implemented throughout? Because we know it's quite difficult right now.
And that's exactly what Prime Minister Young has been talking about. He's been speaking about it continuously, that what we want is a more efficient public service and things to be done more efficiently generally. How do we do that? When you look at the People's National Movement Manifesto and you even look at the work of my fellow Tobagonian brother, Hasselbach, as Minister of Digital Transformation, you would see that there's this drive to digitize and digitalize information and processes to make things more efficient. I mean, look at something that we saw recently. You can now renew your driver's permit online. That's not by joke. That didn't happen yesterday. Very soon we're going to have e-textbooks. That's not by joke. That's not yesterday that started. We have a health information system happening where somebody from Roxborough who would have gone to the hospital in Roxborough, if they're in Port of Spain for whatever reason and they fall ill, they can go and their medical records could be pulled up by an authorized medical personnel in Port of Spain General Hospital. That's not by joke. That's not by happenstance. These things have been in progress, and these things are not election promises. These things are things in the works and already happening. Contracts have been signed. It's just a matter of implementation at this current point.
Now, what's the PNM's policy when it comes to land tenure? Because we know it's an issue that has spanned several generations, especially for Tobago, where land has been handed down, where it might have been from the plantation owners and so on. But people to get their deeds, that's impossible. And it was brought to the fore, especially during the land acquisition process for Bon Accord. And AG, then Faris Harari, actually pointed it out in Parliament that there's a land tenure issue that needs to be fixed. But we haven't really seen it being fixed.
Okay, well, good. So we continue to work with the agencies, like the Land Settlement Agency, and also, again, looking at the People's National Movement Manifesto, once the property is under $4 million and it's being passed down from generation to generation, you pay no taxes on these things. A lot of the times, the land tenure issues, and I'm speaking from partial experience, a lot of the times with the land tenure issues going from family member to family member is because families do not have that disposable income to pay the taxes associated with transferring the property to a new name, whichever relative it be, mother, brother, sister, whatever it may be. So again, we see a plan in place to address that and how that could be done in a more effective way and easier. And again, working with the agencies like the LSA. Okay.
And then when it also comes to a property tax and so on, there's also a concern that, of course, Tobago being very unique, very different. A lot of our properties or of our humble properties, I would say, are on the beachfront. But there is on the books, when you look at the property tax, there's a different tax bracket for those with beachfront properties. But not taking into consideration the uniqueness of Tobago and the fact that our villages are on the beach.
Well, and again, that is the beautiful thing about our democratic process, our system, and again, what was mentioned by the then Minister of Finance, Colman Burt. You could actually go and justify and make a case for your property, and it was an open process. And I know people that did go and they said, okay, well, this is the circumstance with my property. It's not exactly what it's not cut and dry. It's not
So there's some flexibility in that law.
There is flexibility if you can make justification for your property and the circumstance of your property. There is that. So again, we are open to it, and we've always been open to the discussions with people.
Now, we've been speaking quite a bit also about business and that, the ease of doing business and all of that, the investment that needs to happen. When you talk to the business community here in Tobago, and they've been complaining for over a decade, actually, that there needs to be a change to the Land License Act that makes it a little bit more complicated than foreign investors would like to be able to purchase land, do investments in here, and take the economy forward. Is this a matter that you are familiar with, and is this something that you would be looking to see what adjustments can be made?
So when you talk about that particular issue, that is something that would really be guided by different ministerial portfolios. So it's not something I can speak to directly at this point in time.
All right. Now, you're also somebody that's very much into arts, the arts and communications and so on. We have a budding orange economy here in
Me
Tobago.
too.
So how can how do you see that now growing and becoming a more influential part of our economy, the national economy?
Well, again, I go back to the manifesto because a manifesto is what it is. It is a guiding document of how a particular political entity, party is going to move forward in terms of development, in terms of a country. Prime Minister Young spoke about this many times on the platform, so I'm just going to reiterate what he's already said, right? A Cultural and Innovation Council. Why and what does that do? One, it gives those involved in culture and the arts a seat at the table to speak on how do we develop it and how do we earn foreign exchange, how do we get investment, how do we monetize it in a real sustainable way. That's what that does, and that is exactly what we want to see, and exactly what, again, Prime Minister Young has been speaking to. This So again, this is something that I want to speak to a little more personally. So for every actor, every drummer, every dancer, every cameraman, every audio technician, every host, every person involved in media, arts, and culture, what you now have is a seat at the table where your interests are going to be looked at specifically in the National Development Plan. Because that's what it is. That's what this Cultural and Innovation Council is. This is you all being part of and thought of as part of the development of earning revenue for your country. It is going to, obviously, it is going to affect Tobago in a very serious way, because Tobago, again, has some beautiful, unique cultural elements. When we talk about Tobago Heritage Festival, again, and the Tobago Wedding, when we talk about the Tobago Wedding in itself is such a beautiful thing to see. And again, being someone with roots in Mariah, you know how that could be used to basically bring in tourists. It is a tourist attraction. Anybody that's ever been to Mariah Wedding knows that is a tourist attraction. And you look at all of the other elements. You look at the work that TPAC is doing. There's a possibility there. And TPAC is a great example because they recently signed that deal where they went on a ship.
Yes.
And they did their production. And again, ways of earning. How do we sustainably build it? We're seeing the possibility. And now, those of you all in the cultural and the art space and the media space now have a direct part of where we go as a country. Think about that. Has that ever happened before? In this way? Yes, we've always given love to culture and cared about culture. Hence, the steel pan is our national instrument, legally. But moving forward, we're going to talk about how we can contribute to revenue, which is a whole different conversation.
And can we touch on that a little bit, that contribution to the revenue? Because we know that, the orange economy is so underdeveloped here. We don't realize the potential for earning forex, which is so needed at this point in time.
Right. Well, that's the thing. The reason why Prime Minister Young actually is putting forth this council for innovation and for cultural innovation, it's really because he does recognize that the orange economy is there, and it's there for us to take advantage of. When you look at the different art forms that we have, we're talking chutney, we're talking soca, we're talking Trinidad, we're talking lots of different music. We're talking our reggae music industry, even where people like Garden Night and Positive contribute. We're talking gospel. We have it all.
All right, great. Now, you're going to be around in Tobago just for the day.
Yeah.
Tell me about your plans here in Tobago while you're here, because I know, you're busy on the ground in Diego Martin, but you did still take some time to come to Tobago for a little bit.
Yeah, so there's a few different parts at one. Again, just to see some family. Two, I do want to go Mariah, and because I hear Ayana Webster Roy is walking in Mariah today, and that's my home village. So I look forward to doing that. And later on this evening, we will be at the meeting in Mason Hall.
All right. And then are you excited to just be here in Tobago? I mean, how do you feel? How is the ground feeling for you?
It always feels amazing to be in Tobago because Tobago has a different level of morals and values. It's very special. The way Tobagonians see things. Even this morning, I was taking a walk in Bonaccord and a woman said, have a great day. She didn't just say good morning. It wasn't just good morning, good morning. She's like, good morning. And I said good morning back. And she said, have a fantastic day. Something like that. And I was like, you know, that is Tobago. That is Tobago. Tobago is that place where you know there's always going to be that grounding and that moral compass is always going to guide you.
All right, great. Well, Mr. DesVignes, it was such a pleasure speaking with you this morning and just getting a little bit into some of your ideas and some of your heart into going into this election. Of course, best of luck. And viewers, if you want to see him, like he said, he's around for the day and he's going to be in Mason Hall later.
Yes. Will you be?
We'll see about that. All right, viewers, I want to thank you so much for sticking on with us this morning. It was such a pleasure as usual. But Tobago Update is not done yet because we have Fight for We with Natalie Silly Richardson right after this. So she's going to be getting into some conversations with some of the candidates that are up for this election. We have a record number of candidates in this election. So we got a lot of conversations to get through. So stick around and see what else is next. Bye for now.
We are power. We are people.